I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for dialing in and joining me for the festival. Obviously, I wish you were all here in the studio, but with the current times, I think it was safer that we do it virtually. But thank you so much for joining us. And we're talking about the Future CDAO, and certainly a really interesting topic for me. It's been great to get to know you guys over the last few years, and I'm interested to know from your perspectives what the future looks like. And I'm going to try and avoid the crystal ball context too much, and we don't want to be looking too far. I think let's look at 2022 and maybe a few years beyond, but I'm not going to ask you to do too many projections in the future. But let's start at the beginning, and I would love to know from each of you, in your own opinions, what makes a future CDAO? What makes a future one, as opposed to one that's now? What makes a future one? Gladwin, I'll come to you first for that one.
Okay. I'll look at Catherine. Thanks for that. Two key things, in my opinion. Someone that has a strong business focus and a strategic view of everything that data touches. We're talking about prioritizing initiatives and work aligned and having alignment to your company's strategy, and that business focus is critical. An example from a previous life was a company that I worked with that shifted one of their key strategic focuses from B2C to B2B. Now, make it real from a data angle and standpoint, what the analytics team then did was to pivot their analytics. Instead of looking at a pure customer view, we actually changed our analytics to focus first on the advisor and then the customer makeup under each advisor. So that was the first point, that strong business focus. Always, what does this mean for the business? Secondly, and most importantly, is the people and culture focus. We've heard the saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I've often said that technology doesn't implement transformation, people do. Why is this so important? With the great resignation rearing its head, so for future CDAOs, and the shortage of data people, as we've always had, what can we as leaders do to create opportunities and the right learning culture for our people and wider businesses? That tax analyst who's been with the company for a decade and is looking at their options currently. Heck, could they be the next budding data scientist with the right support and training, that upskilling, cross-skilling from different teams? Imagine the amazing business knowledge they have in their heads to combine with your insights. I think the first point we talked about, which was very looking at digital customer experience and front office, but more and more we will be seeing, and I feel, more and more of the digital employee experience, or that back office, is going to matter just as much, if not more. If you're truly a data-driven organization, can your employees get the right data at the right time? And just how frustrated are your employees in having to get that data to do their jobs?
I think it's really interesting, Gladwin, that you position that in the context of where we are and where we're going, especially with the business transformation. I think obviously the example you give there, moving directions, but I think that's what we've seen in the COVID era, right? So many businesses having to pivot, so being business-minded is so crucial. But then, as you say, the other context, so we all are experiencing, no matter in this festival today, I'm sure there's people looking for new opportunities or having just moved as well, and the context of understanding that. So thank you so much. Hartnell, listening away, nodding away there in agreement, I think. What about yourself? In your opinion, what makes a future CDAO?
Thanks for the question, Kat. And to best answer this question, I would like to take us a few steps back just to explain how we got here and had this role that is the CDAO. Now, if you look at the late 90s, when we actually had the first chief data officer, the person was actually appointed to look at more on data management and data governance. Because most of the crunching work was still being done by computer scientists and people who are basic analysts. You had to get someone who could look at the enterprise of data and know how to manage the different elements well. Fast forward, and we used to call that role the CDO 1.0. Now, fast forward, you had the CDO 2.0. This was someone who now was told, other than just managing the data, sitting in the different mainframes, how can we start having some value? And off the decision support systems came the role that is business intelligence. So not only governing data, but also understanding how can I visualize the data? How can I explain the data in form of reports and insights? CDO 3.0 is a blend of more than that. So you're looking at data management, data governance, understanding BI, but also analytics. And analytics on board different aspects. I think it's this level of CDO 3.0 that you actually had the split and also the merging of the roles. You had the chief data officer and the chief analytics officer being born when you're transitioning from CDO 2.0 to CDO 3.0. And over time, we have seen that the two people can actually support each other. Now, how does the future look like? In my opinion, we have been having this role that is the chief digital officer. And likely, I'm not predicting, I don't have a crystal ball here, but I think you actually have to have the role of the chief digital officer and the chief data officer blending in a way. And a concoction of all this now brings the future person that can speak data and also innovate using data and encompass different realms and aspects of data within your enterprise. So the simple answer to this is that the future CDAO must be both data and digital. Data encompassing not only business intelligence, data management, as well as data science, throwing in obviously AI, fuzzy logic, and all this robotics, process automation kind of concepts, but also being able to speak digital, understanding customer problems, understanding customer journeys, understanding total experience, because we can no longer be sitting in our offices saying that we're just helping the data move across the enterprise and in and out of the organization without knowing how to innovate with it. So you'll start seeing more of chief digital officer and chief data officers, chief data and analytics officers working together. And you may have one role that blends all of them together. That's my response. Thanks.
Hartnell, and a great response it is. And I think what's brilliant is there's going to be audience members from all over the spectrum, all over the world, in fact. And I think there's going to be some that are dialing in today who are perhaps at the very start of that journey, in a sense that they're managing the data, they're looking forward, and they're looking forward to that journey as well. So I think what you've demonstrated so well is actually it is a journey, and organizations have to kind of go through that as well as to the capabilities, the technology, and being data-driven. Are you ready for a digital data officer, or do you need someone who just needs to get everything in order first before you start doing that work? So thank you very much. Now, Hannah, it's so great that you're joining. I'm really glad you're on this, because obviously the conversation we're having today is all around a report that Cloudera has supported alongside the business of data and Crinium, all about this. So a huge passion area for you and Cloudera. And obviously you can really talk about all your customers and clients and people that you work with and what you're seeing in the market as well. So I would encourage you to do so in this first question of what you think really makes a fantastic future CDAO.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. And it's really awesome. I love going third and hearing everybody's insights. So all of that, all of what we just talked about, so being able to talk with the business and IT, obviously an extremely strong skill. And also the other thing, so we have the Future CDAO report. Cloudera has also done some recent research on having an enterprise data strategy. Obviously, that's really important. And companies that have a strong enterprise data strategy, make more money. It's a little bit of a duh. But what we're seeing is that the ability to actually implement that strategy, deliver value early and often is critical. So there's this part where there's a lot of ideas, and I have a lot of ideas, and where you can come up with a great strategy, but if you can't actually deliver that strategy and deliver early, quick wins, as long as a long-term transformation, then the strategy doesn't really mean anything. So what makes a fantastic future CDO is somebody who can make friends, figure out the right use cases, figure out an enterprise data strategy that they can implement and deliver. And really what we're seeing in our role is people who sort of come up with a great strategy, but then are finding it challenging to actually deliver on that vision. And so bringing together the strategy and the implementation to actually deliver that change and deliver that value, I think is really where we're going. And some people have made it, so some people are already sort of there, but I think to the extent that people can think realistically about really what's going to deliver the value, that's where we're going in the future.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me that you actually separate the value into kind of short term and then longer term, because I think you're going to fall down a path of destruction for yourself if you're focusing on one or the other, right? If you're just focusing on short-term wins, yeah, that's great, but what's the overall achievement? Or, as you say, the long term, if you're just focusing on the long term and then you haven't really got something to show and keep people energized about it, right? I mean, as data folk, we're really excited about this, but other people, sadly, may not care as much. Whereas if we can keep making their lives easier, we can show the transformation and show our working, they're going to be more bought into the longer stuff that may require more time, resource and budget, and we can keep that going. Now, Hannah, I want to stay with you. As we've heard from your answers and the others, collaborating with the business is a big part of being successful in the future. And many data leaders have said and have been seen to almost act as data translators to the business. Is this something that you've been seeing with your customers, that they're creating this role for themselves as a translator, enabling that collaboration with the business?
Sorry, muted there. I think that's an interesting term, data translator. So I think what we find is that a lot of the business people actually know their data pretty well. So some of the translation is happening back to IT or back to some of the other areas of the organization to really help understand what the business people are saying, and connect some of the different terms that people are using within the organization. The other thing we see is this idea of translating to data to value, but also being able to prioritize different use cases by value. So there's the idea of being able to understand the data and being a translator, but also being able to understand what is going to deliver the most value and having modeling and sort of ways of determining on a consistent basis which use cases to deliver first and what is going to deliver the most value for your organization and for your goals. So it's partly being a translator, it's partly bringing together different parts of the organization for a common understanding of those goals, and then figuring out sort of a common understanding of what the goals are and how we're all going to work together to deliver value. So I think it's a translator, but it's a little bigger than just sort of a data translator. I think it's really bringing everything together to really reach the organization's specific goals.
Yeah, almost bringing everyone around the same table so that we're all speaking the same in that translation role, but actually making sure, as you say, we're all heading in the same direction with the goals and what we're wanting to achieve as well. I know many leaders have told me on the podcast and other formats that you don't want to have a data strategy that's separate from the business strategy. In fact, they should really be the same thing, because if you've got two different directions going, then there's going to be trouble ahead. So certainly something I've heard a strong message towards. Hannah, thank you very much. Hartnell, how about yourself? Within Absa, how much of a data translator role are you still playing? And obviously, as Hannah brought in there, it can go the other way as well, and that you're having to translate from the business as well. What's your thoughts?
I agree. I think number one with Hannah, most of the consumers of data understand their data from the front end perspective. But when we speak about data translation, number one, we also have to remember that we do have our board members, our other executives who have brick and mortar roles, like the chief finance officer, chief risk officer. They don't speak data that much. And it's important, as you said, Hannah, that they have to understand the data strategy. So translating what it means to them and how it's going to be important to them is something that we have to keep on doing day in, day out. And yes, to answer your question, Kat, yes, I do translate the strategy to date because we are adapting it. And every time you adapt it, they still want to go through all the slide decks and just understand what has changed, what is moving, how will they see value or importance from your updated strategy. Number two, if you look at the downstream translation of data, then you can split it into two. Number one, there is the data technology translation, because we do data, which are the contents, but you have the container, which are the different systems hosting our data. So you have to have someone who's a system steward or someone who understands the architecture of your data environment to be able to translate to different subject matter experts. I can tell you data quality analysts will need a bit of translation of the system and how it works. You may have the data management analyst as well. Some BI analysts who want to create value out of data. They will require a bit of translation from the technical people. And the other type of translation that you can have when you're actually going downstream is translation of insights. Remember, data is supposed to create value, and the easiest way to create value to the consumers is actually giving them insights. But they're not easily read out. Some of them are supposed to be easily actionable, but some will require a bit of translation. Understanding the prescriptive ones, how should they be of value to business? What should business people use the insights to do? The common question I usually get is, so what? Or what do I do next? And that's translation. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And actually, you bring up on a really interesting point there, Hartnell, around the insights and understanding, because as we know, as you've just said there, some data you can look at it and understand it and go, okay, that's the insight, but some of it's going to be complex, and that there can be that risk that it gets misinterpreted. And that is the last thing we want the business to be doing, is taking our data and saying, okay, this is the conclusion, and it perhaps not being the most representative conclusion you could make. And then we can then fall down the pit of not trusting the data because you don't understand it. So that case of really understanding the insights, making sure that everyone is understanding the context behind that data as well, all the way through from what data is being fed into. And I'm not going to divert into an ethical conversation, but in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking about the insights behind, what we're gaining and how that's been made as well. Gladwin, I'll come to you. I want to draw a little bit more on the former part of the question there about business collaboration and what that means to you and how your role is doing that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, like most people, people person kind of prefer face-to-face, and so COVID and virtual meetings have made it harder. But I almost use the analogy of a sandwich approach, as I call it. It's that culture, again, is key, and education is part of that culture. We've touched upon it with Hartnell and Hannah very aptly. But education of data, its state, its problems, and the opportunities with sort of at the executive board level. So again, top down, having sort of those regular touch points with key stakeholders, with my team, myself, with those key stakeholders on the data problems and nirvana, that middle level or the meaty center, and then the regular touch points between data teams and the business owners and the front line, with sort of the eyes and ears of opportunities and problems in business are key. And with those sort of three layers, got your sandwich. But then Hannah raised a really good point around having the enterprise sort of data strategy. And I would say the topping on a garnish on top of that sandwich is your strategic third-party providers and suppliers. And in one example this year, we actually, and I had my data governance and management strategy with one of our key third-party providers, and we mutually agreed upon it. So they had full visibility of what we were trying to achieve, and together we aligned with that. And that, I think, with key strategic partners is key. Now, again, with any of those sort of layers, missing any one of those layers, and you've got a cruddy sandwich. However, there's no silver bullet. And I think with each one of those things, try something. If it doesn't work, change the frequency, length, the format. If it doesn't work and no one's getting any true value out of those, forums like meetings, like for some, working groups for others, innovation labs to show the art of what's possible at regular touch points. On a quarterly basis, we tend to do that to share with the wider business what's being done in the data space, sharing sessions on sort of analysis done, executive and board meetings, trying them in different forms and different times. And as the company's maturity increases, see what works and bring some of those things back in a nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. And all this talk of sandwiches, Gladwin, you're making my stomach rumble, so I'm hoping that's not coming through the link there. But I think this, and you know I love a visualization, but I think it's such a strong one, because if you think of a sandwich, if one of those elements is missing, it's a bit bizarre, right? You're going to be looking at it in front of you, and it speaks so great to that analogy that if one of those key components is missing, then it's not as good as it could be. So a really great analogy for our audience to take away there. Now, something that is ringing true, I think our audience will agree, and I'm hoping you three will as well, is that data is quite cool, right? We're talking about the innovation. We've talked about the journey we've been on, lots and lots of progress and transformation. And it means that we're often in a space of having to explain things or educate. We're in a position that people come to us and say, hey, have you heard about AI? Or it could be blockchain, or whatever the buzzword is at the moment that's really interesting. So I'm keen to know, what importance do you place on demystifying data, AI, and the rest of the elements that people might come to you and say, hey, Hartnell, what does this mean? You know, how much of a role is that taking up at the moment? And Hartnell, as I picked on you, I'll come to you first for that one.
Okay, so I fully agree with you. One thing we have to remember is that as we are using and deploying different data systems and technologies, more are actually being developed and researched about. So as you keep on explaining what BI is and analytics is to your business people, then you will still get AI, fuzzy logic, and different types of algorithms that will still be of value to them. So it's a continuous kind of process whereby you have to keep on explaining and demystifying the technicalities of data. Now, why it is very important, number one, I can give 3 points. One is it's because of support. If you really want your data strategy to be funded, then you still have to demystify and explain what is AI, how is it going to be of value to us. If you leave it to the chief execs, they'll just say, we have still been making money without you. So this AI, I don't think is going to be of value to us. The second thing is adoption. If you really want people to embrace and take up the different data specialties and things that you're trying to roll out, then they have to understand it. So understanding it here is one, I understand that AI is going to help me grow my sales. AI is going to help me identify propensity to buy from my prospective customers. Then I will warm up, because most of the time, if you come up in a presentation to the business with very huge words and very complex terms, then they actually shy away from adopting or even trying to understand what they can be of value to them and also to you. And the third part is growth. We are looking at the data team members and the data practitioners being people who help the business understand how to use data. But over time, we have to remember that we have to give room for self-service analytics. We have to give room for data democratization. So business have to be able to take up some of your tools that are more developed for self-service and continue scaling them and continue building insights for themselves. So if you do not demystify this, then you're actually hampering your ability to get to that level where data is not only used by a central team, but by all business people to create value for themselves. Thanks.
Absolutely. Now, I was very careful when I wrote this question to use demystifying, because I didn't want it to be a positive or negative, because I think, as you've just said there, Hartnell, it can be AI is going to cure the world and all our problems, ta-da, everything's done. Or it can be the opposite side of the coin. It can be AI is going to take my job. I don't want anything to do with it. Scary stuff can happen, which I'm not going to lie, both sides of the coin have their arguments. But I want to say demystify, because I think you can have a kind of somewhere in the middle. So Hannah, yourself, what are you hearing from your customers, clients, the market, when it comes to this role that we've kind of embodied as an educator and kind of a fountain of knowledge in this space?
It's interesting when you say that. You know, I'm working for a software vendor now, but I've worked in the data and analytics space for years. And I feel like that's my role, like everywhere, like in crowded bars, to explain how data and analytics work. There's so much misinformation and people are so afraid of it. And there's some really bad press. And so I often find myself as sort of like explaining it or saying, let's look this up. Let's Google this right now and figure out how it works. And I think that's part of, I think Gladwin was mentioning a lot around the data culture culture. So a strong culture has a curiosity around data and where these algorithms come from and where the data came from. And we find that within our business, sort of where did the data point come from? Oh, is that really how we define it consistently? So there's the internal part. But as industry professionals, I think we spend a lot of time demystifying data and analytics and AI in a lot of our walks of life. A really cool project that Cloudera did is a children's book about data and AI. And I know it sounds a little silly, but what the idea was to get children thinking critically about how their data is used. So we have generations that are growing up with all the gadgets and devices, just getting people to think about what collects data, how we use data, how we can use data to help our businesses. The book is called A Fresh Squeeze on Data, and it's available on our website. And it's a cool sort of really early starting this curiosity and sort of data cultural mindset around sort of what is data, what is analytics, how can it enrich our lives, where should we be careful? But I think it's a huge part of our roles, both as just data and analytics professionals in the world and within our businesses.
Oh, well, all my friends are going to hate me now because I'm going to be sending that book to everyone who has children, Hannah, because I'm like, they need to read this. Move aside all of the Peppa Pigs of the world. You need to read this. Because I think what's really interesting, and I love that Cloudera is a leader in this space, is that in our education, we would have had cyber safety to some sort, social media kind of being brought up of, you know, that person behind the screen may not be who you think it is, et cetera, et cetera. And I love the fact that there's this growing demystifiers, as you say, in the bar or the hairdressers or wherever you are. It's a case of bringing up that conversation because we're empowered to do so. And I love that you've extended that beyond the customers and clients. It's about everyone. It's about saying, are you being safe with your data? Or rather, let's look at the positive side. Are you being empowered? Are you achieving everything you want to be able to achieve in the future with getting into STEM and encouraging people into this wonderful world as well? Gladwin, I'll come to you to round us out on this one around demystifying data.
Look, and Hartnell and Hannah raised some very good points. I'd say, look, it's a bit of a balancing act. We've all sort of had that executive who's gone off to a presentation where it's promised the world, and due to numerous reasons internally within the business, due to customization, legacy tech, data quality, etc., it just simply isn't possible yet. And I think the important thing, again, to the earlier point that I raised around sort of the business focus and culture and education, is setting expectations early on with people in their new role, or if they haven't yet, setting expectations clearly is critical, and then building out the strategic roadmap and strategy to get the business there is key, right? So it's, hey, look, you want to implement AI, that's great. You can't implement AI in everything yet, but let's take some narrow use cases. Let's get the data right. Let's get our foundations right. And this is the roadmap we'll work towards it, driven by that strategic overarching driver and business focus. So simple answer is yes, it's really, really important. You can't completely be a myth buster and just go, this is complete garbage. And also you can't overpromise because you're setting up the business for failure. So you just have to find that right balance. And instead of saying no, it's yes, but we need to do this to get there.
Mm-hmm. That qualifying statement at the end, because again, you don't want to dampen that passion, but again, it's about being realistic and explaining that as well in a way that they understand as to why we can't as well, because we certainly don't want to be seen as the department of no. So it's, as you say, it's yes, but, and then extending it forwards. Now, I appreciate I've got the timer next to me. I know we're rapidly running out of time here today, so I'm going to try and squeeze in a few more questions before we have to part ways. But something we were talking about earlier, the Great Resignation, as it's being called. But even before that, I think it's fair to say the turnover in these senior roles is quite high compared to others. And I'm keen to pick your brains onto if you've experienced this yourself or with colleagues and peers, and really why you think that we might experience this turnover higher than in other senior roles. Hannah, I wonder what you're seeing at the moment and your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, on the good side, turnover is high because if you're good at this, you're in high demand. And so people are getting recruited into different companies, and that's like good news for great data leaders. On the bad side, turnover is high because the goals are really, really big and it's hard to get things done. And so a pattern we've seen is that people come in with great ideas, a lot of energy, maybe come up with a great strategy, but this idea that it's really hard to implement. And some of that is unfortunately based on sort of older legacy technology, or if you are really trying to make a complicated architecture, it just can take too long to deliver value. And unfortunately, I think people just run out of runway sometimes. So if it takes you 6 to 8 months to deliver one use case and you run into any kind of hitch in that progress and it takes you a year, you can't, that's not going to scale for transformation. So I think that the turnover can be high because somebody, gets a much better offer and gets recruited away. That's good. But it also can be high because somebody thought they could meet the goal, came up with a great strategy, and couldn't deliver it, often not for lack of ideas, not for lack of knowing, having ideas about different things they could do with the use case, but just not being able to deliver it, and having barriers with the technology, but with the people and the processes. So again, it's that sort of idea of, if you're going to keep your tenure, sort of starting small and also having realistic goals, which is hard because I know CEOs sort of push you to promise the world when you started the company, but it's a really big job. So I think technology has to really help you do things faster, do things better, to prevent that sort of turn.
Yeah, and it almost leans back into the previous question, right? You were saying there about you're almost pushed to promise the world to CEOs. It's about demystifying the realities of that situation from the off, which can be very daunting. On your first day, you don't really want to offer up a disappointing pitch of saying, well, yeah, those are great ideas, but that's going to take 10 years as opposed to the 2 years you want it delivered in. It's going to I would respect someone immensely if they walked in on their first day and delivered that message to their CEO. But yes, as you say, we kind of almost need to push this culture of being very honest right from the off, so that we're not 2 years down the line and, as you say, running out of energy and passion to be able to do it. Gladwin, how about yourself? Is this something you've experienced yourself or seen, and kind of what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's an interesting observation, and also related to the Corinium state of data and analytics for ANZ. Actually showed that no CDAOs reported directly to the CEO. So that's an interesting sort of observation for me. Additionally, sitting back and thinking about it, I feel that we're where CIOs used to be 10 years ago. Seen almost as a necessary evil, but not perceived as the sort of value creators that they are, and the value creators that CDAOs can be. I know that everyone's sort of focusing on digital transformation, but to be completely blunt, you can't do digital without data, right? And so when people start figuring that out properly, I don't think things will change, but it will take time. And look, I think we've all potentially experienced it all in sort of to some extent in our careers.
Thank you so much, Gladwin. Hartnell, round us out.
I like the comments by Gladwin and Hannah, but I've also noticed a very interesting concept that is making the people who are now considered leaders in data analytics have to move jobs now and then. Now, if you look at the rate at which the roles that are data science, data engineering, and the basic hands-on roles in data are spewing up or growing, is because the demand is actually very high. But look at it, in 1 year, you can get 2,000 or 3,000 data scientists being created. The reason being is some of these courses, even the online courses on data science, are actually 6 to 9 months long. So you get that the junior people and the people who are hands-on, who are able to do data science and business intelligence, are actually growing at a very fast rate. But look at the leaders. You cannot have any organization agreeing to hire someone who only has 1 year experience in data analytics to run your whole enterprise data strategy. So it means that the people who have been able to take a lot of time and started earlier and are now considered leaders in data are actually the people who are being pushed by different companies to actually go and lead the strategy. So nobody will ever hire and say, because you went and did a 2 year or 1 year course in data, you're not the chief data officer. They will actually trust a Hannah, a Gladwin, or a Kat, and just tell her that, you know what, you are the best person we think you can actually deliver our data strategy. So that's something that is actually showing up in the area that I'm working, because every time I go to the market and try to look for a data scientist or a business intelligence developer, you have more than hundreds and thousands of applications. But if you look for a head of business intelligence, then it's the same names being circulated around the financial services industry. So that's an interesting concept I wanted to share today. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, Hartnell, and it does, I'll take the crystal ball moment as we finish. It does make you wonder in 10 and 20 years whether this won't be so much of a challenge, because there really is a push, I think, external to the data analytics community. If you look on the news and different things about really encouraging people into STEM, it's kind of in the lay knowledge that data is the future. So hopefully in 10 to 20 years, we're going to be in a position where people will have really had time to explore this world, have fun, move industries, find themselves in a comfortable position, and then do what other departments and fields do, which is move up the ladder, become senior management and into the leaders that you guys are today. But thank you, all three of you, for joining me today. Really interesting conversation. And I know for those audience members who perhaps haven't had a chance to look at the report, I know they're going to be running to the resource area now to download that and read a little bit more about it, because I'm going to postulate that if you're dialing into the Business Data Festival, it means that you certainly are interested in the future of being a CDAO. So I'd encourage everyone to go and read that. But thank you, each of you, for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have you ever wondered how your smartphone is so, well, smart? Or how we'll send humans to Mars? At Cloudera, we provide analytics and machine learning technologies in a hybrid data cloud that does everything from making your smartphone smarter to helping scientists ensure that new vaccines are both safe and effective. Big data? No problem. Cloudera, data that moves you.
We're going to be talking about the need for speed now, and in particular, we're talking about some proven techniques to deliver faster business outcomes and the ways in which data and analytics leaders can help make organizations do what they do faster, more efficiently, better. And Cindy and Carolyn are joining us to do that. Cindy, I'll come to you first of all. Cloudera. Tell us a bit about Cloudera for anyone who isn't familiar with you, and tell us a bit about your role there.
Great. So Cloudera is a modern data and analytics platform. We actually provide the ability to bring together any and all type of data in the fashion that you need data to be analyzed. So think about organizations that want the ability to do analytical workloads on premise, in the cloud, or a combination of the two. So a lot of folks get Cloudera thinking about the like Hadoop technology, and Hadoop has actually changed over time. And Cloudera actually came together with one of the largest competitors, being Portworx, about 3 years ago, bringing together that open source platform, the ecosystem. As an organization, been in existence for, I guess, 12 plus years now, have the opportunity to work with some of the world's largest financial services, telecommunications, retail, insurance, energy and utility, healthcare organizations. In my role at Cloudera, I actually lead our industry and value management team. So what's that mean? We're the business solutions team. We're the group of individuals that are working with customers to help them understand what are the problems that they're trying to solve, that data can actually help them. So I have it's a fantastic role, because I get to experience a lot of different industries, as well as go deep in a few industries myself, and then also make sure that our customers get the value out of their investments with Cloudera.
And Carolyn, Cindy mentioned it there, Cloudera's history and the partners that it's worked with, and the number of changes it's been through. It reads like a who's who of modern day IT, doesn't it? You mentioned Hadoop, you mentioned some of the changes that Cloudera has been through to respond to the world in which we now live. Tell us a bit about your role. Obviously, as field CTO, you have a technical lens on what Cloudera does and helping its customers. Tell us a bit more about how specifically you support what Cloudera does and its customers.
So Just to let you know, I'm a field CTO for Cloudera, and in that role, I help our customers understand, Cindy's team, we work together to help thousands of customers realize excellent business value from our platform. And really, it's understanding, how do we take the vision of these are the use cases that we want to do, and how do we actually make them work? So, there's a lot of architecture, understanding all of the different parts of the platform, and then how to put them together into a solution that makes it work. And that's both from a process and people and a technical solution, right? Because we're taking all of the pieces and putting them together, and then understanding really how do we get these use cases out to the business users.
So really a case of working with customers to understand what their requirements are, because very often it's all too easy to be tempted into throwing some technology at a problem without understanding what it is the company's trying to achieve. That's part of your role, would it be fair to say?
Absolutely. In order to make the use cases work, you have to first understand your strategy, right? So what data do I have? How am I going to make use of that data? And then how does the organization as a whole consume the data in some useful way, right? So it's not all about the technology for technology's sake. It's the technology that's solving a particular business problem. And we have to look at it holistically.
Indeed, and you're absolutely right. We don't want technology shaking the business. We need the business using whatever tools are available, technology, people, processes, in order to achieve what the business's aims are, not what the technology can do. So we're talking about this, as I said, this need for speed and the ways, the tools and the technology and so on that organizations have at their disposal to do what they do better. And obviously our audience is data and analytics leaders. So Cindy, can you tell us about the ways in which data and analytics leaders will be able, with what's available to them, to help their business do what it does faster, more efficiently?
Yeah, and the need for speed and the whole notion of fast data. I think the last 24 months, I guess it's been 24 months now, living in the pandemic, it's definitely taught us about the need for speed and sometimes how historical data can actually lead to bad business decisions, because now you look at some of the examples coming out of retail and consumer goods, or even in financial services, where historical models aren't effective anymore. So a lot of times we would be dependent upon some traditional data sources. Those traditional data sources, and I think the pandemic taught us that data really has relevancy and recency. And when do I need to use what data? There might be new data sources that I need to pull in. So for instance, the dynamics in retail and consumer goods has changed, where historically you would say one of the top use cases might be customer loyalty. Now it's not customer loyalty. It's about, do I have the right amount of stock and inventory to actually meet what my customers want and need? And customers are going not based upon their loyal buying patterns, they're going based upon who actually has the inventory of the items that I want to purchase. So making sure that businesses have access to the right data, the most relevant data in the speed that they need it. In financial services, we looked at early on, what are credit scores? When do I actually extend? Do I need to have empathy to our customers? Are they able to pay their mortgage? Do I have the right data that I need to actually make those credit worthiness decisions? So I think one of the things that we've learned in the last 18, 24 months is we have to be able to act in a much faster fashion with more real-time information. And that's one of the things leveraging the Cloudera platform. We give the ability to deal with any and all type of data in a platform of choice, and then also making sure that you have the right data, you've got data governance. And I think that's one of the other elements is data governance, but I could turn that into another conversation. So
it's a really interesting point about how the pandemic kind of hit reset in so many ways that are obvious, but that historical data point where credit history and so on all of a sudden became less useful than once it was, I think is really important. How easy was it? You know, you mentioned retail there, for example, as well as financial services. How easy was it for organizations, do you think, that had relied to a large extent on historical buying patterns, historical credit transactions, and so on, to acknowledge that reset button and to start looking at new signals in order to inform their supply chain decisions, in order to inform how they enable credit for their customers?
Yeah, and I think that is those that were actually able to hit the put their foot on the accelerator type button were those that were already well into their digital transformation journey, and those that, as part of digital, realized the importance of data. And so those that we saw were early adopters to having a data strategy and analytics strategy fared far better. They'd already made some of their investments, and those that had really been some of the laggards on data, unless you were an organization that relied, predominantly on operational reporting as your only insight versus those that were already using predictive and preventive models. So again, the data landscape, the data maturity, and I think those that have weathered well, especially in the consumer goods area, were those that were already well down the path. Same way within the financial services. I think we saw some slow starts, but I think as companies, looked at the data sources, and then we saw the influx of the cloud adoption and being able to leverage the cloud. So I think those two elements, and that's where the cloud has actually helped organizations on the need for speed. How do I have the right amount of infrastructure? How do I stand things up from an analytical perspective? So again, having those options is, and having that data strategy is important.
Being able to change strategy quickly, and then having the tools, the platform to be more agile in your response. And Carolyn, I'll come over to you on this point. From a technology perspective, what else has helped organizations to be able to respond faster to changing circumstances?
So I think that the last 2 years, really, we can't predict what's going to happen. And there's a lot of uncertainty. And the businesses that are going to be most successful and the projects that are going to be most successful in this kind of atmosphere are the projects that are agile. So agility is an important component of speed. And the ability to have a platform that can do many different things and grows with you as your digital transformation needs grow is really, really important. Having the tools there so that you can pick them up in the platform and easily use them with good security and governance, knowing that security and governance is built in, having the confidence there is very, very important. Being able to build out all of the data sources that you need, being able to make those visualizations and implement all of the machine learning models that you want to be able to do. So being able to evolve your platform and to bring your workloads to wherever they need to be, and where you don't know really where you're going to need to be tomorrow. And I think that's the crux of the issue.
Yes, indeed. And, we talk about the last couple of years as though, we're at the end of this period of change. But as we all know, there are known unknowns, and we're certainly in that territory as we move onwards in 2022. You talk about having a cloud platform that is agile, that enables organizations to understand signals from customers, to be able to make faster decisions. Not all organizations are there yet. Some of them, to your point, Cindy, weren't already on a digital transformation journey when the pandemic hit a couple of years ago. So with change can come pain, very often comes pain. How easy is it Carolyn, would you say, or what would you say are the main challenges for an organization that is looking to change, that is looking to become more agile and do some of the things faster like we're talking about here today?
So I think there's a few things. One is the capacity of your own organization. So there are many ways to get started with data and looking, taking a hard look at your organization and then figuring out where could I use help. A lot of organizations are very resistant to bringing in some outside expertise or to bringing in that critical person to the team and understanding what capabilities they need. So I think the highest performing teams are going to be out there looking at what skills do I need on my team? How can I enable my team? Because being agile is all about having your team enabled and ready to take advantage of everything that's out there on the platform. Getting your team trained up, getting your team understanding data as what the data strategy is, how to work with data, how does, data literacy just basically, and then getting that team connected to the goals of the business. So I think one of the challenges that we see with a lot of technological teams is that they see a technology as what they're delivering. They're delivering, SQL, or they're delivering Spark jobs. It's not about the Spark jobs or the SQL. It's about the business value and connecting those technologists to the mission and what they're providing to the business. And I think those teams that understand that mission and that are really enabled with all of the skills and all of the training that they need and all of the different capabilities are going to be the highest performing teams and the most agile teams.
We talk about digital transformation, and in some ways I think that can be an unhelpful term, because digital transformation is one of the key things that enables business transformation. And that's the most important thing. The technology, the digital bit, supports the business transformation. Cindy, are there any of the techniques that you've seen that help data leaders to deliver their outcomes faster?
Well, I think one of them is, and many times, as Carolyn mentioned, it's always quickly to go skate towards the latest technology. The latest technology is going to solve my problem. But I think a lot of times, and we go back to, what's that data strategy? And those data strategies really have to answer, there's 7 key questions. You go back to our basic things that we learned in university about, the who, what, when, where, why, how, and where. Those 7 key questions that kind of fill into those things. So why and what am I doing something? And the other aspect is think, while those 7 questions, they don't have to have hard answers or take a lot of time, but just make sure that you're answering all 7 of those questions. And think about, just even the aspect of where, cloud. Well, you have to balance where you do certain workloads based upon the business value, based upon the business cost, based upon possibly regulatory requirements. So, going through just answering those types of questions early on, it doesn't have to be a deep and lengthy approach, but approach that from understanding your business goals, your business drivers, the levers, the data landscape that you need, and the cost, the frequency, and who needs access and where things can be performed. So I think those are, have always been my kind of core guidance. I was actually a former CFO. So I was always concerned about the costs. Are we getting the right types of outcomes from the investments that we're making? So, make sure that you've got that data strategy before you define your infrastructure strategy. And that data strategy had better support the business strategy. So I think you've got to have the interconnectivity of those 3, but don't look at one without the other.
Yeah, do you know what, that who, what, where, why, when, how, the basic journalistic questions, that they can be applied in so many different ways. And I really like your framing of, well, ultimately we need to have a strategy, and we need to understand all of the different parameters within the strategy. Those questions are a great place to start. And I guess it's been used in business so many times. Keep on asking why, the 4 or 5 whys. Why this, why no, but why, but why, but why, to really understand each of the reasons behind that strategy. Caroline, are there any other techniques that you would bring into this, again, just to help those data leaders to make sure they're executing as efficiently, as quickly as they can be?
So I think the progression of use cases is really important. So identifying what are the use cases that we could possibly implement, and then getting the right sequence of implementation for those use cases. Because if you look at the use cases, Cindy's team has a really great graph that they show of all of the different use cases, and there's kind of like the maturity of them, right? So you have to look at where you are in the maturity model. Some use cases are very valuable and pretty easy to implement. So those are the ones that you want to tackle first. And then as you start to move out into those more difficult use cases, then you may be getting more value, but you may be looking at a higher investment. So I think to get started, you're best to look at those kind of high value, low difficulty use cases, and then work your way up to those higher value but bigger investment. And I think it's really key to look at these use cases in a not like a one and done, right? We're looking at them as a progression, and we're continually rolling out new use cases that are more and more valuable to the business, and building the capacity of the team. So as the capacity of your team is building up, and you're constantly improving the team, you're constantly adding new use cases, now you're going to be getting more and more value from the platform and delivering more and more value to the business.
Indeed, yes, those use cases can be beneficial in so many ways. Also, in terms of internal comms and storytelling, and actually saying, well, look, this is what we've been able to achieve this business goal. Look how else you might be able to use that throughout the business to find those champions internally who are able to talk to those use cases, can really help, I guess, sell the idea. And, you talked about data literacy a moment ago, to really whet the appetite throughout the business. This is all good and enables organizations to do stuff faster. But let's look at some of the challenges for a moment now. What have you found, Cindy, that can slow things down when you're working with partners? What have you seen to be the real hurdles that have prevented them from embracing some of the benefits that we've been talking about today?
One of those I think is not understanding what questions that they were trying to answer. And many times where we saw people making investments in technologies to answer questions that they already knew the answer for, but they were just trying to optimize their cost. And then they were looking for a revenue upside. And you're going, that's a cost optimization. So thinking about what those questions are that you can't answer today with some of the analytical methods that you're using. And then within that is also looking at, create that hypothesis of upfront, if I could answer this, what would it mean? So, Carolyn mentioned the fact that we look at things from a use case maturity model. And what we've done is we actually look across various industries and say, based upon the insights that we've seen, what have customers done? And you look at what type of use case is driving, let me take a step back, let's look at the questions that you're trying to answer. What goals that helping me try to achieve? Tying that back to an industry value driver tree. Is that a cost optimization type activity? Is it a revenue generation? Is it helping me transform the business? Is it optimizing or helping me minimize my risk? And creating that hypothesis and then saying, okay, how can we actually solve for that question? And then that's the ability to say, because many times we don't actually establish what the baseline measures are. that we're trying to go after. As Carol, things became science experiments. And sometimes you find great insights and you definitely want that innovation, but people are really looking for those tangible outcomes and those tangible business outcomes. So I would say, identify a question that you haven't solved or haven't answered for today. How can I use data to do that? And be open, and sharing what the business goals are that you're trying to achieve.
And that's quite a cultural shift as well, particularly as we talk about making everyone in the organization, empowering them with the capability here, getting them to think of how might I, what is this challenge that I've got, whether it is finding internal efficiencies, whether it's creating a new product or service for customers, how could data help me to support that? It's about, like you say, asking the right questions and understanding that there is data there. How would we use the data that we have available to us in order to find answers to those? Carolyn, what have you seen in your work with customers that have been bumps in the road that are preventing organizations going at full speed here?
So I think pretty much anybody who's in technology would say that there are many things that can take projects. I mean, if you look at the overall failure rate for software projects, it's pretty high. And so there's definitely a lot of bumps that can take us off the course. And I think it's really important to get a good partner that's going to be there for you to help you when the bump in the road happens. They help you to fix your tire, right? So you go over the bump, you get a flat tire, and your partner is going to help you fix it. So I think, looking a lot of technologists, and I don't know, I'm probably guilty of this myself, right? We always want to go to the new shiny thing, but we have to really bring ourselves back to what is our purpose? What are we doing? What's the opportunity cost of rewriting all of the software so that we can take advantage of the new shiny thing? So I think we need to look critically at how we're delivering value to the organization and whether or not the platform that we're using is helping us get there. So there are a lot of bumps in the road. I think Cloudera is a partner that can help get you over the bumps. We have a lot of experience working with lots of different customers, and these projects are challenging. They're very valuable, but they're also challenging as well, and you need that kind of partner.
So engaging with a partner to take you from some of the back streets to the freeway and help you get into that top gear. Your point about seeing shiny new technology and getting excited about it, there's nothing wrong with that in many ways. I'm a technologist as well, and I get excited by seeing how technology can do some amazing things. But to your point, it's just, okay, this is great. Let's take a step back and make sure that it is going to help us to solve, address, move forward with a business problem overall. Listen, we are almost out of time, so we've just got time to cast our mind forward to the future. Cindy, I'll come to you first of all. Any other points that those data analytics leaders watching today should consider as we move forward in 2022? Still lots of unknowns, still an uncertain environment across various industries. Any final thoughts that you would like to share with our audience today to get them in the fast lane on the freeway for this coming year?
I think one is embrace change, look for the ability to have a business impact, look to tie your data and analytics initiatives to that business challenge, that business problem. And I also want to, just remind others that we have the virtual booth that we can share some additional Cloudera insights, some of our customer stories, customer journeys on what others are doing across multiple industries. So welcome and hope everyone will join us in that virtual booth, and we can do some additional collaboration. And I'm always I mentioned I'm a bean counter by trade. I shouldn't say a bean counter, but I'm an accountant by trade. And I always look at how data and analytics can help us solve and make your company more profitable, or actually help, on a healthcare side, how can we help save lives? So.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Carolyn, any final thoughts from you?
I'm just going to reiterate that data and digital transformation are going to only get more and more important with our strategy, going forward. So I think that it makes a lot of sense to get on the digital transformation journey, to find a partner like Cloudera that can help advise you. I encourage all of my customers to make friends with their solutions engineer, because the solutions engineers are where the actual execution happens. So I just, encourage you to reach out if you have questions. Reach out to us. We're here to help. We'd love to help advise you on this journey.
Well, listen, we've been talking about the need for speed, and the last half an hour has gone very quickly indeed, but I think that's the sign of a good conversation. And partnerships, very important as well. Thank you very much indeed for being good partners for this chat. I look forward to chatting with you again some point during 2022, hopefully face to face. But for now, Cindy, Carolyn, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.